Welcome back, everyone. This session is presented by Daniel. How do you say that again?
Lindenberger.
Lindenberger and Misha Samoaden. Daniel is the founder of Banging Rocks, a virtual reality and community-centered company. He brings together his backgrounds in community building, gameful design, philosophy, and virtual reality development to build diverse teams around innovative extended reality projects. Misha helps Daniel. Over to you, Daniel and Misha.
Thanks so much for the great introduction, Manjeet. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks for coming, folks. So we're Banging Rocks. We're a part of Banging Rocks, anyways. And as Manjeet said, VR for positive social impact is really what we're about. So I'm Daniel, founder and head monkey of evolution at Banging Rocks.
And I'm Misha Samarodin. I'm a 3D modeling artist helping on the projects currently that I started back in September.
Yeah. And one of the things that will be a theme throughout what we talk about here a little bit is that part of what I love about the work that we do and sort of my beliefs for running the business is that we as people are creatures of story fundamentally. Story is what informs us, what shapes us, what lets us decide what the possibilities are for us and what actions we're going to take in the world. And each of us is the hero of our own story, but often we don't center ourselves in the story that we tell. And one of the things that I really love with Banging Rocks that we're trying to do is help build virtual reality experiences that help people feel empowered, help people explore, and that are good for individual and collective growth. And at the bottom of it all, it's about finding and sharing and understanding each other's stories. So if we're each the hero of our story, every good hero has an origin story. So if you want to go to the next slide there. So that's what we're going to think a little bit about to start with is if we're each heroes, what is your origin story? Next, please.
Oh, after next as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I may have missed one. Let's go back one. Thanks. Thank you. So yeah, I'd like to invite each of you to give us some serious but also playful thought in terms of what's your origin story? And with that, what are your superpowers? What are the things that are really unique to you that you're amazing at in the world? And then importantly for any superhero is where do you want to aim those? What's your mission in the world? What are the things that you're most passionate about and want to make happen? So from there, we'll hop to three little components of my origin story. One is tech. I am a consummate nerd. Ever since I was tiny, I have been just in love with technology, really fascinated by it. The machine you'll see there is a Tandy 1000. That was the first computer that I had. And my dad bought the family a computer, didn't buy us any video games, but bought us a guide for how to program in BASIC. And basically said, if you want to mess around, you can make your own games, but we're not going to buy any right now. So that was great. Hey, Sam. Hi, everybody who's joining. And what you see on the bottom there is a Commodore 64 keyboard. And what I did was I had a scan of that taped to my binders in elementary school. And on the bus to school in the morning in grade 3, I would sit there and in my mind, I would program. I would practice and I would type away on the keyboard, practicing how to code and just running all the code in my head instead. So from a long time ago, that's been an interest of mine. Another key part of my story is community. Community has always been something that's super important to me. Next slide, please, Misha. So building community, one of the things that was extraordinary for me was being a nerd and a weirdo, one of the people who was marginalized in school growing up. All of a sudden, this magical thing happened where there was a certain point where a huge number of the people who were on the peripheries of the communities of each school found each other. And we had this huge community through the late 80s into the early 90s of all of the people who didn't quite fit in with the other communities in the schools, but where everybody was very passionate about what they were doing and really interested in what each other was about. So ever since then, community has been a giant thing for me. And whether it's in bands, collectives I've been a part of, companies that I've started or joined, building community has been key for me. And that goes on into my living areas, where living in co-housing, working with consensus, and how do we make decisions in a way that's fair and empowered and not just majority rules has been another key thread for me. The final thread in my origin story that I'll talk about is the desire to build a better world. Next slide, please, Misha. So I love this quote by Buckminster Fuller. I'm just going to share two. But the minute you begin to do what you really want to do, it's a different kind of life. And I've absolutely found that for me, that as soon as I started to dive into what I'm passionate about, everything started to change. How that informs my company in a large way is another one of his quotes, which is, you never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. And I find virtual reality is such a powerful way to show people different ways that things could be. And by visioning concretely into a future that's better, it can help us make that future come to be. So those are some of the elements of my story. Misha, do you want to share some of your origin story?
Yeah, absolutely. So reminding, my name is Misha, and I'm also diagnosed with Asperger's on a mild spectrum. But basically, growing up, I had a huge fascination with animation and digital media, video games, and more specifically, as you guys see by the photograph, 3D, because it was like a whole new world. And this is like a shot from Toy Story, which was one of the very first 3D animated films that I also remember seeing. And I think some of it was probably in daycare or whatever, but just growing up and being fascinated about the whole world and how it works. And of course, another passion being kind of like with cars, and because I kind of like the look of the RC car. But basically, as I was trying to understand more about the animation industry and the games industry, and developing, I went to school for a couple of years for that, and I got more into gaming too, especially because of the interactivity between different players and the ability for players to be immersed in a story and tell a story simultaneously, not just visually experience the story. So as you can see, with the car interest, one of my favorite games I've used to play a lot was like Need for Speed or Forza or Gran Turismo. And so, and from leading in from gaming got me into the VR side. So I kind of got introduced around couple years ago, 5-6 years ago, more into VR, understanding how it all works and how you're, as someone with Asperger's, it's easier to be immersed and enjoy that immersion because you don't have as many distractions. Everything is all contained within the headset, and you feel like you're outside of this world that's less distractive, or maybe you only have the distractions of the VR world. And developing your own creative environments in that really kind of inspired me.
Nice. So in terms of what we do, there's a few different parts of that we're gonna explore. Obviously, the end product of what we do is we make virtual reality stuff. We make other things as well, but virtual reality is really a key part of the product. But really, there's a lot more to what it is that we're doing. I also wanted to quickly mention at this stage, because Misha, you were talking a bit about you getting into VR, and I know we're going to talk a little bit about that more later on too. But just a drop-in piece of advice for each of you in terms of, as you're moving towards the careers that you're passionate about. When Misha and I first met at a couple of different organization sort of events that were going on for people in the VR community, what really struck me with him was the passion, and Misha, just your level of interest and passion, and that you just exude it. That like you are in this field so deeply.
I appreciate that.
And that was one of the things that right away for me, I was like, you know what, this is someone who I would love to work with, because whatever it is that's the skill set that he's bringing, obviously this is something that he has incredible passion around, and to know that showing your passion to the people who you're interested in working with, and really talking to the people who you would most want to work with, is a great way to go. And they'll pick up on what it is that you're putting out very often. So to talk a little bit about what we do, let's hop to the next slide, Misha. One of the key things we do is we're about collaboration, putting people first. So while we do have specific projects and we'll have our deadlines and our production schedules for them, where it all starts for me is finding who are the people who I want to work with, the people who I feel like our visions and our compasses around how the world could be and should be are aligned, and where we have interesting things to talk about and ideas around things we might do. From that, we then move towards figuring out what is it that we want to do and what would a project actually look like. And I'll talk a little bit more about that after. But in terms of what the projects could look like, we then do positive impact by project. So we'll talk about 3 projects here that are ones that we're working on. This one is one called Artemon, where we're working with the Federation of Canadian Artists to build a virtual gallery that's procedural, that houses all of their paintings. You know, they can only show a small fraction at any one time, but they've got a database of 18,000 different paintings from contemporary Canadian artists. And part of what we're trying to do is make that accessible. And that means a whole bunch of different things. Make it accessible in terms of you can't fit that many paintings into a single exhibit. Make it accessible in the fact that not everybody feels comfortable going to a gallery, even when there isn't a pandemic going on. It's an intimidating place for a lot of people. Make it accessible in that not everybody physically has an easy time getting around a gallery. It can be a real challenge, especially when they might have a labyrinthine exhibit set up. And you know, if you happen to be, for example, in a wheelchair, the art isn't hung at your art level. So we're trying to make something where the art is accessible, it's at your level, it's easy to move around through the space. Also to make it accessible in terms of the environment, so that people can make some different environmental choices for themselves if they need to. Have it not be overstimulating. Have it so that they can choose, maybe I just want to have a couple of pieces of art in each different room. People can customize it as much as they can. The other key part there being trying to build community around art. So rather than passively looking at art, getting a chance to get excited and to talk to other people who are interested in that art as well, in the way that you choose to, and engage if you want to the level that you want to. So that's one project that gives a bit of an idea. This is a project I'm really excited about called A Wall Opens, that Banging Rocks and myself have partnered with an extraordinary animator, storyteller, Phoebe Titus, to create something that is kind of an escape room, except that it's not stressful and anxiety producing. It's meant to be something that is more relaxed, more contemplative, and explores different sorts of themes. So in it, we talk a lot more about what's our connection to the spaces that we're in. It's also women-centered. So a lot of it is looking at how do women relate to one another, to isolation, to what is expected of them, or the role that they're expected to have. A lot of that gets bound into a story that we tell through this experience. And Misha, this is a great one. This shot here, especially, kind of showcases some of your art.
So yeah, I'll just quickly say some of these models that you see here in this screenshot are from Unity, the software that we use, and the models that I have made are like the chest of drawers, the flashlight, and the letter, and a few of the other props. And I wanted to add these models because, first of all, they were needed for the production, and secondly, I wanted to showcase my modeling skills to the highest ability I can for a production. And I put all of my energy and time into making the models look as polished and refined as possible while still being optimized for the game engine.
Yeah. So it's a journey making something like this. We've just finished putting together sort of our demo video of it, and are working on our alpha version of it. And you know, if there's questions later on about that, we're happy to talk more about the actual process of trying to get a game made. But yeah, it's a bit of a journey. At the next slide, we'll talk about, this is for a project we're doing, which is a meditation project. It's a breath-centered meditation based off of a 1,000-year-old Buddhist technique called Tonglen. And really, some of it is about just learning breath work. There's a piece of it that is also about looking at and exploring our own experience of suffering, and that of others, and about how do we build compassion, again, for ourselves and for others, and generate as much compassion as we can, and about the benefits that come from that. So this is a project that I'm really excited about, that we're working on kind of in that field. So as you'll see, there's quite a range of different kinds of projects that we work on, and where that comes from is that people first approach. It means that we find neat organizations, and they could be any sort of an organization, and then we figure out a way that virtual reality applies deeply within that field, and usually there is one. Another piece that I want to talk about a little bit about in terms of what we do is we look for the non-zero sum. And what that means is, in a zero-sum game, every point that I get is a point that you don't get. It's a win-lose sort of a situation. Some things in the world are like that, but we kind of get obsessed with those things in our society. And Banging Rocks instead puts our filter towards where are the non-zero sum things? Where are the places where there are the maximum wins for everybody who's involved? And so we're really keen to look at how do we explore ways to make it so that our clients, our partners, our collaborators, our employees, our contractors, our end users, the organizations we partner with are all getting as much as they possibly can out of that. And even if that means that we get a little bit less in terms of money or notoriety or whatever that piece might be, if it leads to an overall bigger win, that's something that we're extremely interested in. If anyone wants to throw into chat, if they know where this symbol comes from and why on earth would we have picked this symbol for a thing on non-zero sum, then you're welcome to throw your speculations into the chat. I'll also say, if you have any questions or anything that you want to mention, do feel free to just throw it in. We will have a Q&A time at the end, but if there's something that's burning that you really want to talk about, feel free to throw it in at any point. Another piece that's key of what we do is we're transdisciplinary. So we work extensively with people from various fields. We bring together academia, the arts, industry, nonprofits. We bring all of those different pieces together and try to find where are the places where they play well together, and where we can bring in the wisdom from each of those different fields to make something that's profoundly different and new, and not something that any one of those fields would come up with on its own. We bring together veterans in the field and newcomers. One of the things that is a mandate for us is trying to help people get their footing in the industry. And if people have a vision and a trajectory that they want to set for themselves, we work to find out what that is, so that we can help set people on the right course to move into that trajectory. Finally, we bring together all kinds of different arts. So video game, theater, painting, music, hopefully in the future, dance. And we use all of these different creative media to look at the stories that we can tell, the narratives we can make, the wonder that can be generated for people who are using the different applications that we're doing. So a little bit about what I do. Really, it's a little bit of everything. I don't get as much sleep as I might like, but I have a lot of fun doing it. So a lot of it is meeting people and finding where the resonance is, finding out what other people are up to, researching the people and organizations that are out there, making connections, having conversations. And that's part of why I built this company and this job for myself, is to have a good vehicle to talk to the people who inspire me most, and to be able to find neat ways for us to potentially play together. Turning those connections then into projects, finding the places where we can make something interesting happen out of that, and then finding the partners and the allies who are able to help us bring it forward and turn it into a reality. Then bringing teams together, bringing together the different people who are going to work on a given project, and figure out how that production is going to happen. And then develop. I'm also knee-deep in code often, trying to figure out the details and the nitty-gritty of how we're going to make a given piece work. And get to work with awesome people like Misha and Nemo and Carolina, who are two of the other people at Banging Rocks, as well as our partners, to try to make these things work. And then the other part is just trying to sort of spread the word about what we're up to, and to find out who does that resonate with. Which are the companies, which are the nonprofits, which are the individuals who like the sound of what it is we're doing, so that we can meet more people and keep on talking and find what the next projects, the next things are going to look like. Do you want to talk a bit about yourself and your role, Misha? Yeah,
for sure. So as I kind of mentioned earlier, I'm a 3D modeler, and I've just getting into the VR industry many years ago really inspired me. And now that I've had opportunities fortunately, from all of my hard work and showcasing, having this opportunity to work with Daniel on these projects that we mentioned earlier to showcase my modeling skills. So you'll see the kind of modeling process that I apply for VR, and then I take the whatever I need to model, I find a reference image, and then I block it out with your very generic basic shapes, and then from that I sculpt that or shape that those basic shapes into the final shape of the object, right? And so this is kind of also from a small augmented reality project that we're working on to kind of showcase my models in the best light possible with like basically three-dimensional toys.
Nice. And one thing I'll also say about how we work at Banging Rocks is that everyone gets to wear a lot of hats. So Misha is modeling an environment, but we also have lots of different conversations around different projects that we can do and how we would go about doing different things. And you know, there may be other skill sets that Misha's interested in developing, and so we'll look at what are some ways we can roll that into a project and see how that can work. So everybody who is at Banging Rocks, we're small, we've got 4 folks, gets to wear a lot of different hats and gets to have a fair amount of say about which those hats are. And we'll talk a little bit more about the kind of the whys and wherefores of that after. Yeah, and so again, if we're heroes, all of us are heroes. What does that hero's journey look like? And the image that you see there is taken from Joseph Campbell, who is another sort of a hero of mine, and I really enjoy his way of looking at myth and at how it informs our life and our story. I'll just talk a little bit about my sort of journey so far. It was really slow trying to start a company. I've worked in other companies before. I've started other companies before. But it took about a year to figure out what is this and what do I want it to be and what role does VR play in it versus the connections and the community that we build versus this piece of gameful design and play as being a part of it. One of the pieces of that journey in any good myth is you have your mentors and your helpers, and I've had so many. One of the things that I feel very blessed about is I've had a lot of amazing people along the way, and still do, who are constantly able to give me advice and are able to help me understand what their journey has been like. I definitely want to give a big shout out to Claire Roberts, who was instrumental in that for me. She was really, Banging Rocks wouldn't exist without the work that she put in to helping understand what it could be. The main challenges for me right now are spreading thin. There's a lot to do when you're running a company, especially a small company with lots of projects on the go that's fundamentally emergent. Prioritizing the opportunities that come up can be a challenge because there's so many different ones. One of the things I love with virtual reality is there's so much undiscovered country and potential in terms of what can be done with it. That means there's always new possibilities that are there, which can get exciting but also exhausting. The final challenge I'll mention right now is imposter syndrome. I constantly find myself feeling going between feeling absolutely elated that I get to do this, really proud of the work we do and excited by the opportunities, and feeling overwhelmed and saying, wow, it's like, how am I running a company? And is this really, like, how does this work? And am I an adult who is doing this thing, or is this just something that would be kind of a neat thing to do? There's lots of self-doubt that goes on with that. And one of the things that's a part of our model is a lot of transparency. So it's nice being able to talk with the team when I'm feeling overwhelmed, or to mention when I'm feeling like I'm not sure what the next steps are, or any of that piece. But so imposter syndrome is one of those pieces that can be big, and certainly is for me and some of the other entrepreneurs who are in my community. And yeah, Misha, why don't you tell a little bit about your journey?
So I'll just kind of go quickly over. So I mentioned that basically part of my journey with just being part of the team and getting the chance to work with Daniel, it started actually way back in 2018, 2019, helping on projects like Converge, where basically he created a collaboration of different artists and mediums to create various things in kind of a very organic fashion, and showing my interest to him in digital media and helping out on one of my other first projects, which is assisting seniors on a Surrey Arts project, just with like some video clips and very basic stuff, not a lot of 3D, but when it came down to really working in 3D, I found the opportunity to help with VR because I had a VR headset and I knew modeling. And so how I take all of these and apply them to big, cool, unique projects like Daniel has. And so in doing so, that really helped me and has been helping me right now as I'm building my skills, working with that, and showcasing that even if you do have a disability like Asperger's, you can still work very efficiently when you communicate well with the team members. And that's why my hope is in the future, I can take all of these skills that I've learned working with the team and improving communication and improving just overall abilities to work into future careers in larger game studios and maybe eventually build my own games on the side on an entrepreneurial aspect as well.
Yeah. So one of the things I want to talk a bit about is how diversity and inclusion fits in at Banging Rocks, because it's pretty central in terms of one of our mandates as a company. So the first piece I want to talk about that is just around this piece around unity and diversity, that we're the people who I work with, we're all united in our mission to make the world better. What that looks like and which parts of making things better differs wildly from person to person, but as an underlying piece, that's something that's a passion that's there. And in terms of the diversity, one of the things, so I live in a community that's has been at different times consensus-based or consent-based. And what that means is you don't vote on stuff. Everybody who's sitting at the table has to agree before something moves forward. And one of the things that it's a major shift moving into that. But one of the things you learn the more you do that is that the bigger the variety of voices that are at the table, the better the decisions get made, the more functional they are, and the more just they are. So those are some of the things that are kind of near and dear for me. Next slide, please. The next piece is this piece around honoring each person. So coming from a place where people aren't a means to an end, Misha gets the job done. He helps make assets for games and helps move the projects forward. But that's one facet of who Misha is, and that's one facet of what we care about in terms of who Misha is, as both for me personally and as a company. Everyone is extraordinary, and taking the time to learn who people are and allow them to share what their gifts are, rather than sort of pigeonhole them into a given job description and role, is a key piece of how we try to do things. So really coming again from that people first place. And another piece is the wisdom of the group. So I sort of, the way I like to think of it often is, I'm a bit of a Star Trek nerd too, is it's Jean-Luc Picard's Ready Room. And what that looks like for people who aren't a Star Trek-y person is there's the captain of the ship. And so I'm the person who is running Banging Rocks, but every single person who's at the table with me has their own unique, again, insights, perspectives, ideas, connections, and we work as a team to figure out what comes next. And so even if in the end it's me who says, yeah, let's prioritize this project, and this is how we're maybe gonna partner on that or try to make that piece happen, everyone at the table has a meaningful role in coming up with that decision and in understanding what it is that we're gonna be doing. Another key piece is valuing the margins. One of the things that constantly I discover again and again is true is that it's around the marginalized sets of people and the marginalized voices where you have tremendous wisdom. And often it's the wisdom that is most needed in society because it's the wisdom that doesn't get listened to. So virtual reality is a powerful tool for trying to lift voices up as well, because you get to tell story and you get to put people in other people's shoes, literally. And the stories that I'm most interested in telling and most interested in what we can learn from are often those stories that don't get told as often. So taking in some of those more diverse and more marginalized voices and raising those up and working with people who can tell their own story through that is something that's a big excitement for me. And with that is this piece, which is kind of, again, those goals around world betterment. When all the voices are heard and when everyone's empowered, and when each person feels like they can make change, then we can come together and make things better. So understanding the diversity of the needs and the lived experience, the gifts that we bring, the perspectives that we have, bringing that whole system into the room, that's what allows us to really move forward and to make exciting things happen. we're going to leave a bunch of time for Q&A just because it's a bit of an intricate field and we can talk a bit about the stuff that's in there. But I wanted to leave off beforehand with this. Some of you may know the movie Willow, probably a lot of you don't. But there's a scene that I love in it where Willow, who's the gentleman on the left there, is very interested in becoming a wizard. And every so often this wizard comes to town and he picks an initiate. He picks someone to be his apprentice. And this was his question that he was asking for who was going to be his apprentice. Which finger has the power to control the world? And he held out his hand. And the answer that is always terrifying and often impossible for people to choose and realize the answer is it's your own finger. It's you who has the power to change everything about the world, really. And so that coming from that place of empowerment and finding that for yourself is hard and is terrifying and is so worthwhile as a journey to go on. And I'm really excited to have a chance to be here and for Misha and I to share a little bit of what that's been for us. So we're happy to take any questions that are there. And also, Misha, I want to make sure that there's enough time if you're interested in talking a little bit more about like what your experience has been at Banging Rocks since you've been here and what that's like for you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You want me to start now?
Yeah, go for it.
Sure. So, well, as I talked a little bit about earlier about how getting in and showcasing my skills, it's really been an interesting learning experience. So I think initially starting out, I really enjoyed understanding more about the dynamics of who's on the team and what their roles are and about like the projects that we're working on and like the scope of the projects in terms of size and complexity and everything like that, and being able to help kind of with my skill set in modeling really was something I wanted to showcase to the best of my abilities. And the main project Banging Rocks A Wall Opens that we showed earlier, part of Banging Rocks, was one of the key ones for me to showcase my ability to do multiple models that can be interacted with in virtual reality and see how characters play with them and feel like they're immersed in this whole other reality, and just essentially learning the ins and outs of how and when to communicate with them in terms of concerns that I have, and getting enough positive feedback that when I do run into an issue, there's always some support for me. And that's one thing I value about working with this Banging Rocks is the ability for that cohesive back and forth of both ideas and assistance, and say the flexibility of various projects where you can add a certain dimension of creativity to this project over this. And maybe some projects there'll be some big snags and big technical glitches and everything like that. And it kind of happens with these technologies because these are not your average small 200 gigabyte laptop, right? These are like working with high-end computers and software and stuff like that. So having to overcome those obstacles is always a major challenge, but when you do, it's very, very rewarding.
Nice, thanks. And yeah, and one of the things that's fun in this field, and I'm going to get to a couple of the questions that are there, is fun and challenging, is that the technology is constantly evolving. So, we were interested in doing some stuff that would involve gestural controls, where you're controlling things with your hand, but it wasn't quite there yet. So we sort of shelved a project related to that. All of a sudden, the Quest 2 comes out, and that becomes something that is much, much more feasible. So we're constantly having to learn and then relearn the technologies as it advances at a breakneck pace. Max, great questions. So it doesn't say anything on our website about who we are, and asking is that intentional, or did we forget to add an About Us section? I'll give two answers. One is that it is intentional in that we had a lot of discussion about what that would look like, but it's also us needing to get around to it. One of the things that's key about who we are as a company, working with us in some ways, I realized at one point when we were building the business model, is less like a traditional company and kind of more like a massive online role-playing game, in that people can dive in to do a little bit with us. They might come and stay for a little while longer, or they might become part of the guild, as it were. And so we're in the process of making sort of some playful role-playing based personas of who we are that we're going to be putting into that About Us section. Kyle asks, and this is actually a really interesting piece, also there's no mention of an office location. We don't have an office, we're fully distributed. So for a year, we worked out of the VR AR hub downtown that was a part of Launch Academy, still is. So big shout out to Alex Chang and Ray Walia and the team who run that. It was a huge help for us. But we're totally distributed right now. So we each work from home. We have regular Zoom meetings. We work via a range of different collaborative tools in order to pull everything together. One of the things that I love about the VR industry and that makes it more accessible is that at least in our company, but I think for a lot, it doesn't necessarily matter what hours you're able to work. As in, you might have to have a schedule where you have more breaks, or it might be at night that you're getting some of your work done. You might not be able to sit in a chair for 8 hours in an office in order to make something work. Commutes might be a real challenge. And for us, none of those things are a barrier to being able to work in the industry because everything can be done remotely. I only met one of our dear colleagues for the first time ever while doing a handoff of giving them a Quest 2 to work with when we were already months and months into working together. So yeah, we do everything distributed. Any other questions or comments that come up for anyone? What kind of jobs are you doing right now? Oh, go ahead.
Like the technology, like the modeling on the computer, do they work that way?
Yeah, so we use a range of different things for modeling.
I can speak on that too, actually. So
yeah, please do.
Because I'm the modeler, I mean, if you're ever curious about the modeling, for me, I personally have two or three softwares I use interchangeably. One is called 3ds Max, and one is called Maya, and then one is called ZBrush. Now, because of those ones, I do kind of have to pay for occasionally, and if someone just wants to try for free, the one modeling software I recommend is called Blender. It's actually quite popular, and I'll tell you that there's at least 2 or 3 things that if you ever are curious about that I apply when it comes to modeling. One is understand what you want to model. So if you have a real object, maybe start with that. If you can't think of anything weird or crazy, just find something that exists and look at the shapes of it, basically. So for instance, if you had a soda can, that would be considered what is called a cylinder, right? Or if you have like a car is the wheels are cylinders, the body is maybe a square or a capsule or whatever it is, and if you understand those basic shapes, and then you understand what you're looking at in terms of the final result, you want to make sure that, oh, this model that I want to find out how to take these basic shapes and sculpt them into the final shape that I want, right? And that's kind of the same technique I apply when working in Banging Rocks, and then I just refine it further and further and further. And like I say, there's a lot of complicated things when it comes to the modeling, so I can't go into full detail, but those are the basics that I can say, if that helps.
Yeah, thanks so much, Misha. And one of the things that is really, as you mentioned, Blender is free. Unity, which is the tool we use for making the games and virtual reality, is also, you can get that for free. So you can dive in right away and start monkeying around with some of this stuff. There was a good question from Kyle in terms of what jobs need to be filled right now. Right now, we're not hiring in this moment, but we've just finished putting in a series of project proposals. Part of how we work is we come up with the ideas for projects, we build enough of them that we can show people that we could get it finished, and then we see where can we get funding to get that done. So as of the end of March, we'll know whether or not we got funding for a couple of projects we're working on. We have a few other avenues we're kind of exploring. And we're going to be in touch with Inclusion BC to when we are next hiring to find out who's interested in roles that may be roles that would be fillable for us.
Sorry, Daniel, can I add something to that?
Yeah,
Can
please.
you also maybe just for those who are also curious, explain if what is the usual age range that you look for as well?
Fantastic question. We work with a really wide range of people. So we work with people who are, who are quite young. We are happy to work with folks who are just coming out of school. Um, with some of the people we've partnered with, we've worked with people who are, in their 40s or 50s or wherever it might be. Really, we don't have an age limit in one direction or another. It's just about what are the skill sets that people are bringing, and are those a fit for a project we're working on. We're also happy to talk with people about potential projects and see if it's something or other that we're able to work on with them. Often the answer is no, just because we have limited capacity, but we're always happy to talk, and also happy to talk with people to help direct them towards wherever they might want to look next for their own projects too. There's two basic, in case people are wanting to play and haven't had a chance yet with making video games. Unity and Blender are both free to download, both free to use. If you start to actually produce stuff and make money with it, then they each have different models for how you have to pay for that. But it's free to grab. There's loads of tutorials out there. There's a really vibrant Unity community. And it's a lot of fun. If you have any programming experience, then it's a great way to dive in, and it's very satisfying seeing your stuff come to life on the screen.
Let's see here. I was just going off your question of what brought us all here. So my name's Kyle Chow. Let's see here. My work experience actually mainly involves cooking, but I actually wanted to follow my passion because I didn't think cooking would be able to self-sustain me. And yeah, I actually my passion really lines up with a lot of what you said, like telling stories through experience. And yeah, I thought I like to experience stories through digital media.
Yeah, nice. And it's a wonderful environment to tell stories using digital media. And you can make something that is quite simple, but compelling, that helps people understand the stories that you're interested in. So no, that's great. I definitely encourage you to pursue that.
Can I ask him a quick question, Kyle? Do you have an interest in like animation mostly, or games, or mix of both?
Yeah, I do actually, but I never really actually created any. I do have a lot of fun. I always wanted to share some ideas with people though, and then I always wanted to. I never really could do it myself, but I always wanted to try to make some, try to what to say, post some stories, like try to share my ideas with other people though.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
No, that's great. Natalie, great question. So what about computer games or 3D games? Do you need training? And what do you require? The baseline thing you require is just a computer that's powerful enough to run the software, and the willingness to just blog through a lot of tutorials and learning the basics of what's there. For anyone who's interested in looking at how you can build a video game, I'm putting a link there called the Rollerball tutorial, and this is the starting place for almost everybody who experiments with Unity. By the time you're finished it, you'll have a very simple game, but an actual playable game that you can use, that you can share, and then you may come up with your own ideas of how you want to change it. It'll take a couple of hours probably to work through, depending on how you work through it. But it then has little extensions so that once you've built it, you can then do an extra little piece on how would I make this into a mobile game that I could play on my phone, or how would I add in a scoreboard, or different things like that. There's lots of training and schools, and Misha in a sec can talk about some of the training that he's done to figure out how to do some of this stuff. But you absolutely can start just with what's online. There's a huge community and loads of good tutorials to teach you almost everything you need to know.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'll just touch on some of that. So and part of my original journey was at a school called Visual College of Art and Design in Vancouver, where I learned about animation and modeling. And that was quite a few years ago now, back in 2011 to 2015-ish. And then more recently, 2017, 2018, I learned some of the developmental skills about game design and how each game has things that are called mechanics, which are, to summarize, basically the components of the game that make it playable. And then leading into that is where I've decided to get more into the arts side, and also on the side I've been taking a course to develop my skills with my 3D modeling. So
yeah. And there's so many different, if you know, like skill trees in a video game, there's so many different skill branches that you can take. So another example I know that you used a little on the Wall Opens was photogrammetry. So you could maybe mention a little about what that is and what you've done.
Right. Yeah. So it's a little bit more complex than traditional modeling, but in a way it's actually sometimes faster, because basically what it involves is certain use of a software, and even some of the modern phones have this ability nowadays to take a 3D scan of an object that you have, like, you know, maybe your favorite toy or your favorite collectible figurine, and then transfer all those images into a 3D model onto the computer. And now, admittedly, depending on how you photograph it, sometimes it'll look a little bit messy, but then you learn to kind of polish the model up and make it look pretty like it should. And for me, that's one thing I had to do with a model I had tested for the Wall Opens project. I had to refine it and polish it so that it would work in the engine, because if I didn't, it would just be so heavy and complicated that it wouldn't work in the engine, basically.
I'm going to throw one more link at y'all. This is a link for Lens Studio. And so again, if you're wanting to experiment with different ways of playing with virtual reality or augmented reality, this is free. You can download it. And you know, Snapchat filters, where you can make your face look different, or you can put objects in a room that aren't there. This is the tool that you use for making those filters. And there's lots of, again, different tutorials and templates that you can use. And it's a fun way that doesn't involve programming to start, to be able to make something that's kind of neat and it's your own, and that you can share out with other people as well. And I'm always happy to chat with folks. So if you have an idea, you have a sense of, I'd love to be exploring this industry, but I don't know where, or I don't know what tools to use or any of that, feel free to get in touch. And yeah, I'm always happy to chat with folks about anything that they're passionate about.